What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Adamas Project. My name is Brandon Burns, and I'm super excited for today's guest. This is somebody that he gives off almost a fatherly energy kind of vibe. I don't know if you guys will agree with me, but that's what I've always seen this man as, and he's so wise, he's so smart, he's super successful. If you're into podcasting at all, you probably know who this individual is. So usually I don't do this, by the way. Usually I don't read bios, but I'm going to read this really quick before I introduce our guest formally because this bio is so good. It says, Erik Allen, raised in a broken home, battled addictions, jailed at 18, bankrupt at 21, only to turn everything around. Gave his life to Christ at 24 years old, is now 18 plus years sober, beautiful wife, 2 kids, host of the Erik Allen Show, John Maxwell certified coach, and he helps men of faith feel confident in sharing their redemption stories, and he helps entrepreneurs get known and noticed online. Erik, welcome to the show, sir.
Man, Brandon, it's such an honor to be on your show, dude. You're an absolute world changer, man, and truly honored to be here, man.
Man, no, it's an honor to have you here. I mean, you're one of those people, and we're going to get into this in a little bit, but you've had everybody on your podcast. We still got to link up and get ET on there. But other than that,
Sure.
I mean, you've had everybody on your show. So I just appreciate you taking the time out to jump on mine for a change. But I want to start with this because I always like to start with something that's a little bit different from the general, how'd you grow up? How were you raised? That kind of thing, the background information. And we'll get to all of that. But I'm a big energy person, right? Like I love to play off of other people's energies. And you're one of those people, briefly mentioned it in the intro. You have this wise, like I said, fatherly type of energy. You're very calm, cool, collected. That's what I've noticed after interacting with you a couple of times. You're very in control of yourself. And yet, you have this absolute machine inside of you that can just work like in an aggressive fashion. Like you can get stuff done, right? And I feel like most people, they got one or the other. They're super laid back or they're super aggressive, right? And they don't understand how to have both of those and how to balance those energies. So where's that come from? What is that? I mean, am I accurate? Am I right on that? What do you think?
Man, I think you're dead on. I do love to work hard. I love to get stuff done, and I don't like to be bored. And if there's ever a downtime, then I'm like, okay, I got to go do something. Like I love to be able to do work and put the stuff together. I think where it comes from is really that when I was a kid, and like I said, we'll probably get into this later, but when I was a kid, I was kind of left to do my own thing quite often and got into a lot of trouble as a kid. And so I think that just determination and sturdiness, resilience, that really comes from that childhood that just spawned in me. But I think the calmness is I grew up with so much drama and so much craziness that I just avoid that as much as I can. I'm like, I don't need drama in my life. Like I'll work hard for my family and protect my family. But if there's negativity or anything like that, I had to cut people out of my life because they were just these negative energies, right? And so I love to just bring the positive energy and, man, just love people where they're at, man. That's not my job to judge anybody, right? Just love people where they're at. And I think that's what continues to help me grow as an entrepreneur, as a father, as a husband.
Man, I love that. I love that. So, I mean, I think a lot of people, they chase the drama, right? And it's funny that I heard you say that I grew up around so much drama. I almost avoid that. Like that has no place in my life. I eject that from any environment that I'm in. Whereas I think a lot of people, it's the exact opposite. It's like they're chasing some sort of emotional high. They're chasing some sort of something that's going to activate something inside of them, but it's in a toxic, negative fashion. Where do you think that comes from?
Man, I think a lot of people play that victim mentality of like, when they grew up, they had certain things happen to them, or they went to jail and they did this, or the job that they wanted didn't go through, and that sticks into them, right? And I think what I realized was my past and other people's opinions of me doesn't define my future. And so once I realized that, man, I was like, dude, I can change my life. I can change the legacy of my family tribe for generations to go. Like my job now is to break the generational curses of abuse, rejection, addictions, and divorce that have inflicted my family for generations. And so when my wife said, when we said I do, we meant it, right? And so I think a lot of people just can't make that click of a switch to go, oh, I need to get away from this because they grew up in it. So that's like what their comfort zone is. For me, I had to flip the switch and go, I don't want to be in that comfort zone. That's not my comfort zone. My comfort zone is no drama, no negativity, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to stay in that positive lane and get away from that. I think we all have choices in life, right? We can choose to stay in that victim mentality. We can choose to stay in that negative mentality, or we can flip the switch and go, man, I choose to not do that. I choose to be the one in my family that's going to break those chains.
Yeah, I've noticed that with a lot of people who come from backgrounds that are not the smoothest in the world. Some people who had, I don't want to use the word trauma, but people who had challenging upbringings, right?
Sure.
A lot of those individuals, it's almost like they have a resistance to the concept that because of who they are and whose they are, that things could be easy and things could be peaceful, right? So I have a feeling that maybe your own testimony might come into that. But again, we'll get to that in a little bit. So I'm hearing a lot of the, again, broken home, addiction, jail, bankruptcy. Give me the story that leads up to all of that. It sounds like the first, 20-something years of your life were a little turbulent. So what was that like?
Yeah, a little on the crazy side, man. I mean, I grew up in what I thought was a typical household until I was about 11 years old. We went to Sunday school, I played Little League. My dad would take my best friend Dave and I and literally throw us in dumpsters behind big stores on Saturday morning and say, go find treasure. Like that was a Saturday morning thing, And it was normal to me to go do that, dumpster diving behind stores and go see what we could find, Like I never thought different of it. And my parents ended up getting divorced when I was 11. My mom got together with a guy who's very physically abusive almost immediately. And so right then I started to see my mom get beat up, and she would never press charges. And it drove me nuts that she would allow this man back into her life, beating the snot out of her all the time. And then they got pregnant. And so in the middle of my 8th grade year, they moved us from Eastern Washington out to Stevensville, Montana, population 1,200 people. And they rented this house that was on 5 acres. It was a beautiful property right by the Bitterroot River up there. The problem was the house had 3 bedrooms. So it was one for them, one for my little brother, who's a couple months older at this time, and then I have a younger sister who's 4 years younger than me. And they said, Eric, you can live in the garage. So I literally had a plastic tarp down the middle of the garage that separated my bed from the truck that would pull in. Luckily, my half of the garage had a fireplace that would keep me semi-warm in the middle of the winters of Montana. But that was my safe haven out there. Like, I had my Nintendo, and I'd play Super Tecmo Bowl, right? But I didn't want to go inside. But I knew that if I went inside, if I let the fire go out inside, oh, man, all hell was going to break loose, right? Like, it was my job to keep the fire going. And there was a moment when I was about 13 years old, living in that house. They came home arguing, wasn't anything different than any other night. But as I was brushing my teeth, I felt God go, man, you got to turn around and check this out. And so behind me, as I turn around, it's to the kitchen, to the pantry, to the garage door where my bedroom's at. And I see this man on top of my mom. Boom, boom, boom. Punched her in the face. And I walked up behind him and I grabbed a cast iron pan and I swung as hard as I could and I split the back of his head open. And he turned around and he said, what? And as he did that, he met another smack to the face by the pan, splitting his forehead open, still didn't knock him out. I thought I was the hero in that moment. The cops finally showed up, took him to jail. My mom actually kicked me out of that house a couple months later, and I had a couple months left in my freshman year of high school at that point. And that really set me on the path of destruction for the next 10 years of my life, where I'd move back to live with my dad, who would rent a house for him and I, but he wouldn't stay there. He would just basically give me keys. He'd put $20 in the cup for lunch money for the week, got me bus pass, filled the fridge, with food. But I'd see him in passing a couple times a month. So I got into drugs early on. I got into drinking alcohol. So I was getting stoned before school, lunch, and then after school. And when I was 18 years old, I was a senior in high school, and I actually got arrested for having a bong, which is funny because it's legal in Washington now, but at the time it was not. And, I had to go to jail, black and white chain gang outfit on, bright orange slippers, man. I was 140 pounds. Going to a county jail. It was in Dayton, Washington, and there was about 12, 15 other guys in there, and I was scared out of my mind. And not scared enough, though, to stop doing drugs and drinking. Because as soon as I got out, I went back to drinking. And I was living off credit cards. My dad kicked me out 2 weeks after I graduated. So between the ages of 18 and 21, I moved 21 times. I was living off couches here and couches there. And when I was 21 years old, I was $28,000 in debt and had to file bankruptcy. And it just was absolutely lost. I couldn't even afford a rent that I was paying that was $250 a month because I couldn't hold the job, right? And I ended up landing this job for Universal Records. And this is when I was about 22, 23 years old. And it just gave me the rock star lifestyle that I kind of thought I always saw. Like, I don't know how to play anything, but I was behind the scenes, right? So I was meet and greets and doing track and sales and stuff. But it gave me open tab to every concert. And I was at a concert 2 to 3 nights a week for about a full year. And then the year prior to that, I was managing a band where I went to another 100 or so concerts. So this 2 year span, I went to probably 175 concerts. And just lived this rock star lifestyle. I was lost in the world. But I remember there was one moment that changed my life, man. I was at a concert, and this gal was not old by any means, but she was like in her mid-30s probably, and I was in my early 20s. But I remember looking at her, and I had this moment, and I went, I don't want to be her age and still doing this every night. I want to have a family. And I wasn't dating anyone, but I was just lost in this world. But I remember that moment so clearly. And it wasn't much longer after that I got laid off from the University of Music. This was during the days of Napster, if people remember Napster. And I was working for Starbucks, depressed night manager or guy, and then this girl walked in and said, hey, we've got a college age event down our church. Would you want to go? And I was depressed. I had no friends, and she was good looking. Yep. What time do I need to be there?
Sign me up.
I was like, yeah, man, let's do it. And I went, and I felt like God was like, that was kind of the first step of me starting to get close to him, because I ran into these guys I had met from 4 or 5 years earlier on the other side of the state. This was out in the Seattle area. And it was just this moment where about a month after that, I went out and I partied with some guys, and I woke up Easter morning, 2004, and I felt God going, dude, you're going on this path that's going to end your life. And in that moment, my buddy's basement, I decided I quit cold turkey, drugs, drinking, cigarettes, everything at that moment. I gave my life to Christ. And I called that girl up, and I got her voice, and I said, hey, thanks for inviting me to church. Maybe I'll see you at the store sometime. And a month later, we're dating, and now we've been married for almost 18 years, or 19 years now.
Wow. Wow. Man, there's so many things that we can unpack there. I mean, the first question that comes to mind immediately is, first of all, how's your relationship with your parents these days?
I don't have one. Yeah.
Okay.
When I talk about the drama that I like to exclude from my life, they still bring that in. Unfortunately, my dad has battled addictions for quite some time. He's in and out, and my mom is a lot of drama. So the only one that I'm really I'm not even close, but at least have a relationship with is my sister. And oddly enough, even though my parents got divorced when I was 11 years old, my sister has gotten both my mom and my dad to both move to Houston, Texas, where she's located. So they all live down in Texas. I'm in Idaho, and it totally is peaceful.
Yeah. Where do you get the courage to make a decision like that? Because I think a lot of people, I mean, that seems like a common theme in your story. I mean, as a 11-year-old smacking somebody upside the head with a with a cast iron pan, there's some sort of courage there to stand up for what you believed in, even from an early age. And even now, I would imagine that's not necessarily the easiest decision in the world to say, hey, even though this is family, we got to keep some distance here because I have standards for myself, for my family, for the environment that I create for my wife, my kids, That's not an easy decision to make, even if it is a clear one. So where does that come from? Where's the courage to make those choices come from?
Man, I think there was so much time as a kid that I just did so much stuff independently as a kid that I knew that I didn't want to rely on anybody. And even now I struggle with that. Like, I'm like, I want to do this on my own. And I think that's hard for men anyways, but like I struggle a lot of times to ask for help. Right. And so I've just always tried to do things on my own, and I fail a lot, but I pick myself up and I keep going. And I think just the drive to make a better life for my kids than I had is that number one driver for me. And yep, they know that I'm going to fail. They know that I'm going to, not be a good dad some days. They know I'm going to mess up as a husband some days, but they're going to see me bounce back. And I think that resiliency as a kid is carried on to me as a father who's 44 years old and now just trying to make, the best life possible.
Yeah. How do you go about the process of unlearning? Because when I listen to your story, I hear a lot of, here's how I was raised. Here's the type of environment that I found myself in early on, having to do everything myself. And you mentioned you still sometimes struggle with that mentality, but it seems like, there's been a lot of maturing in that process to say, hey, let's maybe collaborate more. Let's ask for help more. And I also think, there's people on the other end of the spectrum who might grow up with the silver spoon and they have the opposite problem, the same problem, but in the opposite direction, I should say, where it's like, I don't know how to do anything on my own because everything has always been provided for me. And then that kind of fosters a victim mentality in and of itself. So I think no matter how you grow up, at a certain point, you got to go through that process of becoming conscious of, well, here's how I've always done things. Maybe it's not always the best. So how do you go about that process of unlearning, of recognizing it? What was that like for you?
Yeah, I would say initially I was all about it. Like I was like, okay, I have to exchange the environment that I'm in, the party scene, with a different environment. And so what I did was I found guys in the church early on that had great marriages. They were great business people. They had great marriages. They were great husbands, great dads. And I just started taking them to Starbucks. And this was like pre-podcast days. But I was like, I want to know your story. What are you doing today that is making you successful in these areas? And learning from them early on helped me to unlearn stuff. Now I've gone through counseling a couple times, and especially like when I first got married, like I wanted to understand like how can I be a better husband, because I didn't have an example of a good dad or a good marriage, right? And so going through that, but that unlearning process can definitely be tough. But I think it helps if you get around the right people, and if you can get around people that are living the life that you want to live. Just being around them will motivate you to be a better person. Like, I've had Ed Milet on the show, and one of the things he told me was like, if you walk around at 75, you need to go find guys that are walking around at 125, and just being in their presence is going to lift you up and motivate you to be a better person. And so I unlearned a lot of that stuff by surrounding myself with people that were living the life that I wanted to live.
Yeah, that's so important. I mean, that's the exact same experience that I've had with people like ET, just being in that environment, regardless of the expectations that it sets for people. Because I'm a big fan of your exposure determines your expectations, right? So when you get exposed to people who are living a certain lifestyle or who have a certain kind of character or believe a certain type of thing, whatever it is, then it sets the expectation of, oh, maybe I should be there too, right? And it makes it seem normal for you. And so almost by just automatically, you start to level up, even if it's subconscious, even if you aren't trying to execute some of the principles that you get from them. It's hard not to if you spend time around the right kind of people. So that's really insightful. What would you say to somebody, though, who maybe hasn't hit that rock bottom? I mean, it sounds like when you woke up that night after that party, God was talking to you a little bit and you just made that decision. I think there's a lot of people who haven't hit that moment yet where they're almost a little bit too comfortable and they don't have a big enough why to say, okay, I'm done. It's got to change. What do you say to that person who's living in the death of the comfort zone?
Man, that comfort zone will kill people, and literally and emotionally and spiritually, man. And I think that if you have any inkling, and I'm a Christ follower, so I believe in the Holy Spirit, but if you have any inkling of a Holy Spirit or something in your gut that says, man, you've got to get out of this situation. See, we were all created with a purpose and a plan in our life, and I don't believe that our purpose and our plan is to be comfortable. Like, our plan and our purpose is to get out there and make an impact on people. And if we can share our story, if we can get around people that are living the life that we want to live, then that helps us, right? But I think the number one thing that people get stuck in that comfort zone is it's comfortable being in your comfort zone, right? So we need to get comfortable being in our uncomfortable situations, right? So go find people, go do things that you wouldn't normally do. Like, you might just have this in your gut saying, dude, I've got to make a change. I've got to stop this job because it's negative people. I've got to get away from these people, family or not, that are negative, that are drawing me down. And that sucks to make that initial decision. But once you do, you step out of that comfort zone and you start making an impact on yourself and others by getting in the right spot, man. And I think that helps us mentally, that helps you spiritually. Man, I think if you're in that comfort zone, I know that you're feeling something that you're destined for more, right? And so get out of that comfort zone and write down your goals, write down things that you want to do, and pursue that with a fiery passion, right? Go do local meetups of people that are entrepreneurs or whatever it is that you're into. Go find those people and start hanging around with them.
Yeah. It's so ironic, isn't it, that the most uncomfortable thing possible for a human being is to live in that comfort zone where everything externally is going great, but you're not fulfilled and you have no purpose. Yeah. Like, that's the most uncomfortable place that a human being can find themselves in, because it's not a physical discomfort. It isn't even really an emotional discomfort. It's a spiritual discomfort. Like, when you're not being used for the purpose that you were put here for. Like, you feel it, right?
Yeah.
I think the challenge is so many people they misidentify it. They correctly identify the symptoms, but they misidentify the cause. They understand that something is missing. There's a void that they have to fill, but they're just assuming, oh, it's more money. Or they're just assuming, oh, it's a relationship. Or they're assuming, like, it's something, that's relatively surface level rather than what you're talking about, which is, hey, go find a purpose and then let that fuel you. So speak on that for a little bit, because you had the lifestyle, right? You call it the rock star lifestyle. Yeah. That's what everybody wants, right?
Yeah.
So, well, in your perspective, what was wrong with it?
Man, I tell you, it was. I loved it. I'm not going to say that I didn't love it, man, because for me, like, I love music. I grew up listening to music and Elvis on 8 tracks, and just always a fan of music. And so my dream was always to get into the music business. I don't know how to play anything, but I literally had to lie to get my job at Universal Records, which I wouldn't recommend doing. But like at the time, I was working at a record store, and a guy walked in and said, hey, he was with Universal. I said, how do I get your job? And jokingly, he's like, oh, you got to be an intern. So I went and paid $300 for an internship class at the community college, took my receipt to Universal and said, look, I'm in college. They said, great, you're in, and I never went to a class. So like, that's how I got my foot in the door. It was comfortable for me to be there because I love the hype of being around music. Live music for me was a high that you can't get anywhere else for me. Yeah. Being backstage and being on tour buses and being right up front. I mean, early days, I saw Linkin Park for $10, didn't even sell out of 100 people, like back in the early days. Right? Like, so that type of environment, to see those bands, like, I loved it. Now, why... I'm sorry. What did you say? What was the question that you asked now? I'm totally blanking. I was going off on a tangent.
No. You're good. Like, what is it that... I guess what was missing for you? Because, like you said, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with it, I guess, but what's missing from that equation, and what is the misnomer that people have about it? Because people think, well, if I get myself into a position like that, then whatever I feel inside will go away.
Yeah. So, dude, what was missing was definitely the fulfillment portion of it, right? So, I was able to do these things and be a rock star and be backstage and things like that. It's only fulfilling to a certain level, right? That's very surfacey stuff. I can't take concerts with me when I die. I can't take these experiences with me when I die, right? I'm not leaving anything behind if I'm just doing that, right? And so for me, I was missing that family portion. I was missing that love that I wanted for my wife and my kids at the time, just future wife and future kids, right? Like that moment when I saw that girl and I said, man, I don't want to live that life. Like that was the moment. I don't even know what triggered it, but it was something in that moment that was put into my heart that said, man, this is not the life for you. And I think that people can live that life, but I think if you look at it statistically, right, there's probably a lot of divorces that happen, a lot of broken families that happen when you live that life for your lifestyle, right? And not saying it's a bad, if you choose to do that, that's on you, right? But like for me, I just had in my gut that I was not destined to be part of that. And I knew that I wanted to break those chains of addictions, and that was the early on. I think the real steps early on that got me to where I'm at today was that moment, that wake-up call. But it was comfortable. It was fun, man. I got to hang out with Beck and like hang out with like cool rock stars, right? But it was that moment where I just realized, man, this is not for me. And man, I'd say if you're in that spot, man, you'll feel it, like you said, in your gut. Like you're supposed to be doing something else, man. And then you've got to find your way to get there.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes that E.T. has been using a lot lately, and I don't mean to over-reference him, but,
oh, he's awesome,
end up spending a bunch of time with him. So. We end up talking quite a bit. So one of the things that he's been talking about a lot is God or money. And he said, why don't you get both? And I was like, that's a good perspective. Now, obviously, one is more important than the other, of course. Yeah. But I think that's kind of how I'm viewing this conversation now. It's like, because I've experienced a little bit of both, right? I remember last year we went to Austin City Limits, and Toby Nwigwe, he's one of the artists that was performing out there, and he's very well connected with E.T. Kind of helped discover him way early on. And so that was sick, man. That was sick. Being behind we were on the stage, like just off to the side of where they were performing, and thousands of people out there, and you get whisked away in the Sprinter van as soon as he's off stage. So you don't have to deal with anything else that anybody else is working with the crowds and everything. Yeah. And of course, I lived in Nashville for 6 months too, and I've been out there tons of times, so super familiar with that industry. And you're lying if you say it's not fun. You know what I
Totally.
mean? Like, you're completely lying if you say that that lifestyle isn't fun. But
Yeah.
like you said, it becomes a drug.
Yes.
It doesn't last. You know, I even
Right.
think about that doing a lot of speaking these days.
Sure.
There's a high when you get off stage. Like, again, I don't believe that there's anybody on the earth that's just so saintly that they're like, you know what? I don't enjoy this at all. There's no high for me being on stage in front of 1,000 people. It doesn't do anything for me. I'm here for the people. I don't believe you. I
Yeah.
don't believe you, right?
Yeah.
So there is that addictive quality to it. But if that's all that it is to you, then you end up in a cycle of addiction that's just barely less destructive than being addicted to a substance. Like, because
Totally.
it's going to cause you to do the same behavior. You're still making choices for the pursuance of a high rather than for an impact or for something that's sustainable or something that's going to last. When
Yeah.
you really start to embrace, hey, I'm making an impact. Hey, I'm doing something that's going to outlast me. You know, the results and the change that I'm going to make in these people's spirits, it's going to outlive me, and they're going to go each one teach one, right? And now we've got something here. That's the only way you're going to sustain it, right? And I was talking to a group of people the other day, you're like this, going down the spiritual lane.
Yeah.
And I said, you know, the first commandment, it's pretty important. It was the very first thing. You know, number one seems like it'd be an awfully important one. You know, you would think that maybe he would say, don't go kill anybody as number one. First thing out. Don't go hurt anybody else, right? But
Yeah.
it wasn't. It was, I'm the Lord your God, thou shalt worship no other God before me. And so I said, well, how would you define worship? And to me, a very practical definition of worship is the thing that is at the top of your decision making hierarchy. Meaning,
Yeah.
when you make a decision, what do you have in mind more than anything else, right? So if you say, hey, I've got a decision, and if I do it, I'm going to make a bunch of money, but I'm also going to hurt people, and you still make the decision, then money is above impact for you if you made that decision.
Yep.
So if you're chasing a high, whether it's from a substance, whether it's from being on a stage, whether it's from the rock star lifestyle or whatever, if you're making a decision that prioritizes that above being in alignment with the character of God, what's become your God? What are you really
Yes.
worshiping? You know, it's
Huge.
not what you should be worshiping. At least,
Yeah.
I don't know if that resonates with you, but that's why I think it's dangerous. It's not bad intrinsically, but
Right.
just do it. By all means, go live that life. It's fun, but
Yeah.
keep it in its proper place.
Totally. I am definitely on the same page there, man. I think, a lot of people say that, money's bad and all that stuff. And it can be if you worship it, right? Like if you
Right.
treat money like an idol, yes, right? But if money is very powerful for you to make an impact on the world, right? So it's not always bad, but if
Absolutely.
you worship it, that's where you start getting into that bad cycle, right? Man, I'm on the same page with you there for sure.
100%. So, okay, so we have that kind of turn back moment, right? We
Yeah.
we see the person at the concert,
Yeah.
and we're like, okay, I don't want to live that life. We start making some different decisions. Give your life to Christ. We start, I think, not drinking, sober, 18 plus years.
Yep.
What were some of the other practices, routines, habits? Like what went with that to operationalize the change? Because we've all met those people who are like, hey man, today's the day, I'm changing. And then
Totally.
it's like, okay, well, what do you have to back that up with, right? So
Right.
what did you back up that talk with?
Oh man, yeah. So for me, like I said, it was getting into different environments, but also I had to change my mindset where I had this mindset of gratitude on a daily basis. And for me, I have to start my day with gratitude. Immediately, as soon as I open my eyes, I'm going, man, thank you, Jesus, for another day to see and hug and hold my family. Like that's my very first thought before I even get up to go take a leak. I am like out of bed, making my bed is number two, right? So I'm thankful,
Yep.
and then I'm making my bed. So my brain is already stacking these wins immediately. And for me, it was an attitude change where I started to just be grateful for things. And man, thank you that I'm healthy, right? Thank you that my kids are healthy, my wife is healthy, like we're debt free, we own 2 vehicles outright, like thankfulness, right? We have a roof over our head. I have a job that pays the bills, right? Like being grateful is such a, I think, underutilized tool in people's mindset, right? Like if we wake up, man, we have an opportunity to make an impact not only on our life, but other people's lives. Like even just saying hello to people can make their day. So when I go out to the grocery store and someone's got a name tag on, I'm calling them by their name because it's not just there for every Karen to make a complaint, right? It's so that we can call them by their name. And when you say, hey, Bob, thanks for helping me out, or thanks Tiffany for helping me out. Like you see their face light up because they're being seen, they're being acknowledged, right? So that gratitude is so massive in me every day. Like I have to do that. And I'm an early riser. I get up at 4 a.m. 6 days a week. So I'm getting up. I'm first thing gratitude, right? I'm hitting the gym downstairs, and then for me, I'm coming upstairs, and that's really my worship time, right? So I kick on worship music, spend time in prayer. I read some Bible. I read the Proverbs, man. And that whole time is maybe 20 minutes, 15 minutes. Really, I don't spend 2 hours of meditation, but I get into it, and that's really what helps set the tone for the day for me.
Man, I love that. And as you're speaking about gratitude, something came to me, which was that gratitude complements discipline. Because I think we've all heard those guys that are really, really hard edge, where it's like you just got to be disciplined, you got to be disciplined, you got to be disciplined. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, I was an athlete, I know what that's like to be up 7 a.m. lift every single day, 6 days a week. Then you got practice, then you got this, and you're doing that for years at a time. I mean, discipline is important. If you don't have a routine, if you don't have some sort of schedule, it's going to be hard to, like you said, stack those wins and really move the needle. But I think it's so much easier when that discipline comes from a place of gratitude, when it comes from a place of, man, this is awesome. Like I get to wake up right now and make my bed and make me a better person and contribute towards this epic day that I'm going to have.
Yeah.
Like that's so much easier than I gotta make my bed. It's like
Right.
that. If you're forcing yourself to do it, you can do that for a week, for a month, maybe for a year, but I don't see that lasting a lifetime. So I think that perspective is super, super valuable.
Yeah, man, it's all about it, man. And my prayers are very gratitude driven, man. I like I said, I don't tend to ask for a lot of things, but man, I'm so thankful for just being alive today because there's a lot of moments where I shouldn't have made it,
Yeah, yeah. So where we go after that, right? We make a 180 shift everything in life. I know we got a podcast that comes out after that, but I don't know what's the timeline look like. What started happening in your life after you made that change?
I really was just doing the corporate sales thing for the first couple of years. I was married. My wife and I, we were married for 5 years before we decided to have any kids, and we just kind of got to know each other and went on missions trips down to Mexico and things like that. And so I just lived the normal life, and I got into that comfort zone, right? Like I was comfortable making a really just base salary that was paying the bills. But a goal of mine when we decided to have kids was to bring my wife home and be a stay-at-home mom. And that's pretty hard to do these days. Like you've got to make quite a bit of coin to be able to do that. But my daughter is almost 14, and when she was 6 months old, I was able to make enough money that my wife was able to come home and be a stay-at-home mom. And so for me, I started just going after jobs that were not only fulfilling me financially, but mentally, right? They had to have a great culture, right? And each year's gotten better. 2012, I decided to start a company called Top Rated MMA. It was back in the days of Tap Out, right? And so I was doing MMA apparel company, right? And we launched at an event out in Seattle area. No one knew who we were. I hired a UFC fighter from The Ultimate Fighter to be at our very first event. So he's doing photos at our booth, and the main event fighters are wearing our gear. So we kind of like blew up kind of right at the beginning, where I was getting calls from like Jeremy Stevens, from the UFC. His company was like, "Oh, can you sponsor for 10 grand?" I'm like, "Dude, I just started this thing with $500. There's no way." Like early on, I did that apparel thing, and I did that for about 4 years, just apparel, just trying to move hats and shirts, etc. But I got bored with it, and I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with it. But then in 2017, I started the Top Rated MMA podcast. Didn't know what I was doing in podcast. And I was in a walk-in closet, bad microphone, bad lighting, didn't even look into the camera. And I was literally asking MMA fighters, why the heck do you want to get in a cage and get punched in the face? That was my only question that I really asked them, right? And it just kind of blew up from there. But then in 2018, I came across a guy named Ed Milet online, and I was like, oh my gosh, this dude, his values are aligned with me. I like the way he's talking with guests. Like, I just started sponge watching every episode that he was dropping. I mean, I wanted to do exactly what he was doing. I thought, man, I want to hear entrepreneurs. I want to hear world changers, success-minded people, and I want to talk with them. So I started what used to be called the Bearded Biz Show because I had a really long beard at the time. But I was doing 2 podcasts. I was doing the Top Rated MMA Show, the Bearded Biz Show, from 2019 when I started the Bearded Biz Show, and I did both shows till 2021. And now I just focus on the Erik Allen Show. And episode 241 drops this week, man, of the Erik Allen Show. So I had my 500th interview just a couple weeks back, man, since I started this thing. And man, it's just been a fun journey. And podcasting is truly, I think, the number one way to market your brand, but also connect with people that are living the life that you want to live. Because I couldn't walk up to Ed Milet and say, hey, can I pick your brain? But if I say, Ed, can I have you on the show to talk about your book and your values? Most people are going to say, yes, I want to talk about that, and I'll share it with your show. Right? So it gives me an opportunity to have this one-on-one conversation with folks that probably wouldn't give me the time of day if I ran into them on the street.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so we started it for fulfillment. We started it for, of course, networking, right? Getting some access, kind of restructuring your own environment. Why keep going? I mean, I know that's a nuanced question, right? Why start it and then why keep going? But I mean, you said you've done 500 interviews. You've already interviewed Milet, John Gordon, like a bunch of A-listers. I'll give you, another year, maybe two max until you get to the point where you can interview whoever you want. Really,
I'm going for it. I'm going for
it. So it's like, why keep going?
Man, I love this question because podcast people are like, well, why do you keep podcasting, right? Not like, there's relationships, there's networking that comes out of it, great collaborations, partnerships. Some of my best friends today are people that I've had on my podcast. The number one drive for me to podcast, though, is legacy. I wish that I could go back 3-4 generations deep and hear my great-grandfather's voice and hear his story from him directly. But I can't. But I'm able to do that with podcasting today for future generations of the Allen Tribe. That is my number one driver for podcasting, is I get to leave a legacy that my great-great-great-great-great-grandkids can come back and go, man, Grandpa Erik, he was a stud, he was a rock star, I loved his energy, right? Like, he made an impact. That's my number one drive for podcasting, is the legacy side of it, man.
I love that. I remember there was this old quote that I read one time. Actually, I didn't read it. I heard PBD, Patrick Bet-David, another huge podcaster, obviously. Huge. I heard him say this, and he said that every man should do three things: have a son, plant a tree, and write a book, because all three will outlive you. So I think maybe we ought to start a podcast to that list, at least in the modern era. Yep. That's awesome. What are some of the things that you've learned from your guests? I mean, presumably after 500 interviews, there's some things, some patterns that stick out. Like if Erik Allen was going to write Think and Grow Rich, the 2023 version, well, by the time this comes out, 2024, what would be in your version after having interviewed so many successful people?
Man, it's the resilience to keep going. See, one of the questions that I ask all of my guests right off the bat is, tell me about your childhood and where you grew up. The reason that I ask that question, it's very specific, is because I want my listeners to understand that no matter who I'm talking to, we were all kids once. We all made choices to get to where we're at. No matter if we came from the broken home or the silver spoon home, we were all kids once and we made choices to get to where we're at. I mean, David Meltzer coming on my show and losing $100 million, like that's mind-blowing and not even like comprehensible to most people, right? But then I've had those people that were born and they had a great life and then they got hit by a car and then they were paralyzed, right? Or football. Eric LeGrand has been on my show, like football story like crazy, right? Dude gets tackled wrong way, paralyzed from the neck down for the rest of his life, but he's out there doing coffee shops and alcohol and he's like liquor, like really cool, just making an impact through his organizations now. I love to be able to talk with so many awesome people about that. And I think the thing that I've heard over and over and over is you don't quit. We're all going to fail. We're all going to like not get to where we want to on our first try. Probably not our second try or our third try, but we keep going. One of the things mentally that I kind of put together too throughout the 500 interviews was myself, I had to become a quitter. And when I say that, I mean I had to quit thinking that I didn't deserve a great marriage. I had to quit thinking that I didn't deserve a great life. I had to quit thinking that I was not impactful with my story. And I had to quit quitting. And so once I put that in my mindset, man, it just allowed me to have this non-stop, unbreakable chain of I'm going to make an impact, right? And so over and over throughout my podcast, you hear these stories of redemption, right? People might have failed, but they redeemed themselves and they kept fighting and kept going. And I think that's that mentality that I've taken in over 500 plus interviews now.
Yeah. Where do you think that comes from? Like going one level deeper, where do people get is it a motivation thing? Is it a discipline thing? Is it a standards thing? Like, why do some people not give up and some people at the first sign of trial and tribulation, it's like pack your bags, go home? What's the difference?
They don't want it bad enough. Dean Graziosi is a guy that I haven't had on my show yet, but we're working on that. But he does this exercise called 7 levels of why. And so it's really like, why do you want to do this? Okay, cool. Why do you want to do that? All right, cool. Why? Go 7 levels deep of why. I think not enough people go to that 7th level of what they really, really want. And they're not willing to fight for that 7th level of why. Right? They might get through a layer or 2 or 3, but they don't dig deep enough for that 7th level of why. And I think once you realize that, man, your life is so important, and you can make an impact through just doing some really minor things, man. Just saying hi to people, just exchanging a hello with people can make an impact on their lives. But I think too many people, they'll start something and they'll fail and they give up. Oh, it's not for me. Oh, I can't do it. Man, you look at how many times the guy who started KFC, it failed, man, at restaurants, right? Like, he kept going and kept going, right? There's just certain people that are going to quit after a couple layers, right? But, man, the people that are successful are those ones that can break through time after time after time, and they know, they expect to fail, right? I think people who quit are the guys who are like, I can do this. There's no stopping me. But it's the guys that actually know and expect that they're going to fail. Those are the guys that wake up and go, man, I failed, but I learned, and now I keep going.
That's powerful right there, because I think a lot of people, especially these days, like I said, when this drops, it'll be 2024, and we live in a very woke culture, right? It's a culture that says you should be confident in yourself for no reason. You should love yourself for no reason. You should, and to an extent, like, there's some truth in that. You should be confident because you're a child of God. You should love yourself because you do have intrinsic value, because you were put here for a purpose. So, like, there's value in that. However, when it goes too far, right, and we start to become a little delusional of, oh, well, I can never fail. I'm above failing. That's for everybody else. I don't do that, right? Those, like you said, those are usually the ones who, as soon as you get punched in the mouth, you're out of there, right? Yeah. The people who say, you know what, I'm going to start this business, or I'm going to go into this marriage, or whatever it is, I'm going to lose 50 pounds, like whatever your goal is, and I anticipate being punched in the mouth 126 times between now and success. Conservatively, I expect 127 punches, and they will hurt, and they will have real consequences, and they will leave real scars. However, I understand that this is the price to pay. This is what I'm signing up for. When I talk to athletes, it's funny, I always mention that the results that they want do not care how expensive they are. Like, your opinion of the price to pay has no bearing on whether that price changes. The price is fixed. There's no negotiation. Here's what it takes. Here's what it costs. If you don't like it, you can leave and you can not play the game. If you'd like to play the game, this is what you're signing up for. It's just a reality check for people, man. And people don't want to look at it that way. People, I don't know what it is, but some people, you're right. It's like they've calloused themselves. Is that something you've noticed? Is it like something you can train, or do they just have it?
Man, I think everybody can learn to do that. I think that we have to flip the switch, though. I think if you get beat up enough times, you're going to go, man, okay, I need to keep going. Don't give up, right? I think there are people that get stuck and they have these longer periods of like not breaking through, and some of them never do, but it's because they've gotten lazy, right? They didn't continue. They gave up on that why. But, Bedros Kouliany has this 72-hour experience where he basically keeps guys on this thing for 72 hours that they're awake, they're doing crazy push-ups, they're doing Navy SEAL training, right? And when I talked to him on my show, one of the things he said was, it's the dudes that go in that are the most ripped and the high energy guys that are like, oh, I'm going to kill this thing. They ring the bell the first, because they get in there and they get a real awakening of what real life is. It wasn't just going to the gym and getting buff, right? It's the dudes that go in there egotistically that get their teeth kicked in the fastest. And I think not enough people are getting their teeth kicked in these days, man. Like, they need to like, hopefully not physically, but mentally and spiritually, they need to get beat up for a second, right? And then it'll push them to break through to that next level.
Yeah. I mean, you learn about yourself in those moments, right? Yeah. It's really difficult to truly learn about yourself when you are in a first world country with air conditioning and heat, with food that's easily accessible, with enough money to where if you don't want to go out and get it, you can Uber Eats yourself a pizza. Yeah. I mean, it's it's kind of difficult to really know. You begin to intimately know a perception of yourself that you have crafted based on the environment that you're in.
Yes.
More so than the real you once you strip all of that away, And I think it's so unbelievably easy that this is something that I learned, right? It's an everyday thing.
Yeah.
It's an everyday thing because for me as an athlete, like I said, I was used to pushing myself until I was about to pass out, pushing myself till I was about to go puke in a trash can, because I was conditioning so hard. I was used to that. And then I retired and I expected that because of who I was, that I would continue to be that same person inside just by momentum. Yeah. Right. And then it was a rude awakening when, suddenly I started to notice, oh, hey, you're slacking on certain things. Hey, you're not as disciplined as you used to be. Hey, you're letting this go a little bit more. It's like, where'd this come from? You used to be a freaking beast. Yeah. And it's like, oh, well, you got used to not being that uncomfortable that consistently. Right. And so one thing I always love to challenge people to do, whether you're into fitness or not, and you should be at least on some level, but whether you're a hardcore workout kind of person or not, just go hold a plank. Everybody can do a plank, right? Yeah. Just push up position, hold it, and then take a timer, put your iPhone timer, and hit go, and then take your phone, put it face down, and slide it across the room. And see how long you stay there when there's no finish line. Because you can't say, oh, when I get to 5 minutes, I'm going to stop. Right. When I get to 10 minutes, I'm going to stop. Just see how far, no television, no music, no nothing. And just see what happens inside your head because it will start to introduce you to just you versus you. Yes. And see how you react. And I think it's important for people to put themselves in that position because if you don't know yourself in that kind of environment, I would argue you don't know yourself at all.
Yes. Oh, man, it's so good. That's huge, man. I think the 30 seconds in the plank takes, feels like it's been 5 minutes. You look there and you're like, oh, crap, man, it's 30 seconds. So I love the idea of pushing the phone away, dude. Like, don't look at the time. Just keep going, dude.
It's like, see how far you're really willing to push it. Because everybody who's done that before, you're going to know if you actually collapsed or if you decided to come down and to put yourself out of that pain. And it's not necessarily anything wrong if you decide to, okay, I've had enough, but you need to at least know where that point is. But anyway, I know we've been, the time's been flying. We're already 47 minutes in, but I got to ask you this. Yeah. Because I was on your Instagram earlier today when I was just preparing my show notes and I saw one of your pinned posts. By the way, Erik G. Allen on Instagram. Make sure you go give this guy a follow. He brings phenomenal content and value with every post. It's Erik with a K, G, Allen, Allen. But one of your pinned posts is the list of guests that you've had on your show. And I've alluded to this a couple of times. But what struck me was Ed Milet, right? World-renowned superstar in the personal development industry, speaking, coaching, podcasting, author. He was guest number 12. Guest number 12. And here's the thing that made me upset. Then I saw Pedro was episode 16. Uh-huh. I saw Pedro behind backstage at Funnel Hacking Live a couple months ago. I talked to him. Everyone, like, I know him. And I haven't even invited him on my show. So I'm like, man, episode 16, episode 12, you got these superstars on here. Where's that confidence come from, dude? Like, for one, how? Tactically. I want to, like, just selfishly, I want to know tactically. But two, from a confidence perspective, episode 12, I mean, dude, how?
Here's the funny thing. I'm working on a new highlight video. And by the way, you made it on the new highlight video. So that will be dropping soon. I'm so excited to release it, dude. Yeah, dude, we're working on that. Here's what happened. When I first started podcasting, I was reaching out to folks and inviting them on my show. I did what 99% of people do when they reach out to guests. They have a template, and they just change the first name, and they email that to them, or they send it to them DM. There's no video. There's no personalization. It's literally just their name changed. And I realized early on that was not going to work if I wanted to get the right people on the show. And Sean Whalen was episode 8, right? And then it was Ed, and then it was like it just continued to blow up from there. But the way that I do this, and I do this for every single invite that I do, even today, is I pull out my phone and I literally do a 30-second, no more than 30 seconds, personalized video. Ed, what's going on? You just dropped your book, Power of One More. I want to help you promote that thing. It's such a great book. let's jump on and have you on my podcast. Won't take longer than 30 minutes. Let's make it happen. Either way, keep chasing the roll. And
I love that.
I book 99% of my guests through Instagram DM with that exact video. You have to make it personalized and don't make it about you. You've got to say, hey, I want to help you promote this event. Or, man, I love that post that you just did. I saw you got a book release come up. Let me help you promote that. You have this event come up. Let me help you promote that event, right? People want that promotion. It's free, right? They don't have to do anything. They just come on and talk about it. And so if I can say, man, I want to talk about this thing that you've got going on, they're like, dude, let's do it. And so that's how I book all the guests is I quit being selfish. I just said, man, I want to help you promote your thing. And that has opened up the door to so many amazing people that have been on my guest or my show. And I think that people acknowledge that and they go, oh man, thanks for sending me that personal video. And usually I'll just send that one video and then just a small text, a podcast invite request, right? And I don't even say much about it. I want them to watch the video because I want them to hear the sincerity in my voice that I generally want to help them promote and bring, share their value with the world, right? It's not about me. And I think that's what has helped me to connect with these people. And I typically, one thing that I love to do is after these guys have been on my show, I send them all a gift. And then I usually will follow up with them every 3 or 6 months just to touch base. Hey, thanks so much again for coming on my show. Like, that's the way, man, you're awesome. I appreciate what you're doing. I'm just praying for you and your family. Every 3 or 6 months, some of them may never respond back, but they know that I'm reaching out to them. They'll see them every single time. And that's what helped me get on Brad Lee's show. Was he was on my podcast and I was sending him these videos. I was like, oh man, back in 2021, I did 117 interviews on other people's podcasts. And had messaged him. I was like, oh yeah, I'm doing this podcast tour thing. I'm trying to get to 100. And I think I was like 90 right now. And he goes, hey, fly to Vegas, we'll have you on the show. And I was like, shut up, dude. Like, mind blowing. Like that opportunity only comes when you put in the action, dude.
Yeah. I mean, people are more inclined to help people who are helping themselves already. You know, it's like nobody wants to help the woe is me looking for a handout. People don't want to help that person. Right. People want to help the person that's grinding, that's working for something, and they say, "Hey, this person's special. Like this person really wants it. Let me see what I can do." It reminded me of that Zig Ziglar quote, right? If you can help, I think it's Zig anyway. Yeah. If you can, maybe it's Jim Rohn. If you can help enough people get what they want, then you'll get what you want.
Yes.
But it starts with providing and adding that value to other people. So I get the tactics. I get the strategy. By the way, if you go to Erik G. Allen on Instagram, he's got a link tree in his bio. He's got a course on how to grow, launch, scale your podcast. He should be selling it for like 30 times what he's selling it for. So please check that out. Where's the confident mentality behind it come from, though? Because a lot of people would hesitate, especially, and I'm going to scroll back up in my show notes here. If you go to somebody else, somebody who's not you, who does not have your mindset, and say, hey, I know you were raised in a broken home. I know that you battled addiction. I know that you went to jail at 18. I know that you were bankrupt at 21. But I want you to take out your phone and send a personalized video to Ed Milet. 2, 3, 4 million followers, however many followers he has. I want you to take your phone out and send this video to him and be confident enough in what you're saying that he's going to feel it on the other end of that video and actually come jump on your show. How do you, I guess 2 questions. How do you not identify with your past? And number 2, how do you, I guess, replace that with confidence? Like what? Yeah. How did that happen?
I had to look at it like, what's the worst that's going to happen? They're going to say no. All right, right? Like I could send a video to all of the guests, right? And they're not going to like jump through the phone or come hunt me down because I'm asking them to be on the podcast. But like I had to have this idea in my head, like if I shoot them a message, there's probably more people that are scared to ask them to be on their podcast than there are people asking them to be on their podcast, right? Yeah. And so if I can reach out and I can be that one guy who reached out to them and they're like, I wish I could do other podcasts, right? But people are scared. They think, because they're so big that they're not going to even respond to them. Here's how I got connected with Ed. Really funny story. I followed Ed on Instagram after I came across him in 2018. And I realized that he has a house in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, where I live. And I shot him a message thinking that it was from my Erik G. Allen account on Instagram. It was not. It was from my top-rated May account, which I had not been active on. I sent him a video on Instagram DM, and he didn't even have 1 million followers at the time. But I said, Ed, I saw that you have a house out here in Coeur d'Alene. It's an amazing house. Next time you're in town, I'd love to buy you a burger. First of all, never say that to somebody who's rich because they can buy their own burger. But I said that to him, right? And I was like, after I said that, I was like, oh, crap, man, that was really stupid. I shouldn't have said that, right? And then he responded back in like 5 minutes. He was like, hell yeah, dude, let's do it. And I was like, shut up. Did Ed just respond to me? Right? Now, here's the thing. I never got to meet up with him for a burger. But what happened was about a month later, he ran a challenge on Instagram. He had about 1 million followers at this time. And he said, I want you to record a video, put it on your stories, and tag me and tell me why you want to be successful. What is it that drives you to be successful? And I recorded a video and I tagged him on it. And then he kept doing these things like, oh, this is a top runner. This is a great video. Top runner, top runner. And then one morning I woke up and I was tagged by Ed Milet and I won that contest, which landed me the phone call with him, which I was just me and Ed for 30 minutes. And he spoke so much life into me in that 30 minutes. I mean, he was at his house in Laguna Beach with the ocean in the background, and he was just blocking everything out and just talking directly with me. And the confidence that he gave me through that one conversation, man, it changed the trajectory of my life and the confidence that I had. And like you said, I was episode 12 that I had Ed on, and so I knew moving forward, every conversation that I was having with people like, man, I've had Sean Whalen on the show, I've had Ed Milet on the show, I can get anybody I want on the show. And that might take 4, 5, 6 tries, 10 tries even, but I'm going to get them on my show. And so what I do now is I create this wish list at the beginning of each year. Some of them are unicorn people like Eric Thomas, right? Like guys that I want on my show. And I'm going to continue to reach out. Guys like Inky Johnson, Les Brown, these type of level guys that I want on my show. And I'm going to continue to reach out to them. But that wish list that I create at the beginning of the year, I target those guys throughout the entire year. Every couple months, I'm just reaching out. And I'm commenting on their posts. I'm getting my name in front of them, liking their things, sharing their posts, right? So they're going to start to recognize this Erik guy. And it's, they start to recognize your name. Really funny. I actually have on my wish list Mario Lopez from Saved by the Bell, if anybody knows who he is, right? Like, yeah. But I purposely started commenting on his posts and purposely started like saying, man, that's awesome. Or he does some really cool stuff. So I don't just do it like to just get him on the show, but I actually do follow him because I do love what he does. But I started to make more comments and I started to acknowledge things that he was posting. And then all of a sudden he started liking my posts, right? And he started like acknowledging that I was commenting on his posts. And I was like, this is awesome, dude. Right? I mean, like, so if you're putting out the value or commenting on their value, like saying, man, you're doing some awesome stuff, they're going to reciprocate that. And they're going to start to recognize me. So when I do reach out, I may not get the opportunity the first time, but at least it's going to recognize that, hey, man, that's that Erik guy that has commented on my posts over and over and over again.
I love that. I think that to have a full circle moment here as we close out, I mean, that speaks so much to the power of a good mentor, right? The life that Ed was able to speak into you, that one phone call in a matter of 30 minutes. You never know who those people are going to be. It might be some huge influencer like Ed Milet. It might be your next door neighbor. I mean, you don't know who that person is going to be. And I think that's why it's so important to just keep your heart open to that kind of thing. It's funny. I'll tell you this quick story and then we'll get out of here. But I remember I was in Michigan. I was still in college at the time. And my mom had some kind of health thing going on where she ended up in the hospital. And it wasn't that out of the ordinary. I mean, we almost lost her when I was maybe 13, 14 years old. She was kind of in and out of the hospital for a couple of different things when I was younger. And she's stabilized a bit, during my college years. And now that I'm out of college, she's better than she was. But there's always that underlying fear of, something could happen at any given time. Yeah. And so I was maybe a junior in college, get the phone call from dad, like, hey, everything's fine, but, we're at the hospital. We're going to probably be here a couple of days, see if we can figure out what's going on. And, of course, I was terrified, Sure. There was a bunch of trauma because of that kind of thing earlier on in my childhood. And so I'm kind of living these 2 or 3 days just in this constant state of anxiety. And I end up going to the store one day, and I go to Meijer, because in Michigan we don't have, Publix or anything like that like we have in the South. So I go to Meijer over in Ann Arbor, and I'm walking down the aisle, and I'm walking this way, and there's these aisles that are facing the opposite direction, 90 degrees from each other. So I'm walking perpendicular to the aisles that have the gift cards, right? Okay. And I'm walking, my eyes are this way because that's the direction that I'm walking. Right. And for whatever reason, as I pass one of these aisles that I'm perpendicular with that have all the gift cards to either side, the thank you cards, the get better soon cards, all that kind of stuff, I turn and I look and I make eye contact with this. It was a black woman in probably her 60s. And she was looking at her card. She looks up. She looks at me. We make eye contact. She smiles. She looks back down at her card. I keep on walking. Whole interaction lasted 0.2 seconds, right?
Yeah.
And I texted my mom at that moment, and I was like, hey, God just told me you're going to be okay.
Oh, come on.
And from that, like, immediately, so much less stress. The anxiety was just completely taken away from me. And she was. I think she was discharged from the hospital the next day, wow. And everything was fine, you know? And what was so impactful wasn't necessarily that particular circumstance. What was so impactful was what my mom texted back to me. She said, you never know when you're the angel that God's going to use like that. That's why it's so important how you carry yourself. That's why it's so important for you to keep your heart open. That's why it's so important for you to be obedient, because you never know when you're going to be that person for somebody else, man. Right? And so just hearing you talk about Ed and the way that he was able to affect you, you know, you never know when that's going to be you. So, yeah, keep your heart open to it, man.
Come on. Yeah, dude, it's so important to, I think, have that intuition to be able to listen to either your gut or Holy Spirit, whatever you believe in. But like, man, and act on that, right? If you feel that urge to go and do something, man, act on it. Text that person, right? We never know when it's going to end, man. You know, I always just say, like, man, if you get a sudden urge, like, to text somebody and say hello or just check in, just do it. Like, stop what you're doing and do it, man. Don't wait. Just go for it.
Yeah. That urge is there for a reason. Well, Erik, I appreciate you, man. It means a ton that you jumped on the show. Really quick, where can people find you if they want more?
Yeah, so erikallenmedia.com, so ERIKALLEN, so erikallenmedia.com is the website. You mentioned on Instagram, that's probably where I'm mostly active on. It's just Erik, ERIKG Allen, and I respond to every comment and every DM, man, because I love connecting with people. And, man, if someone has a question or someone's like, man, I'm going through this, what do I do? Like, I want to help you out. Shoot me a DM. Like, you know, I want to help you out there. And, man, there's a Facebook group if you wanted to join. If you're into podcasting, I have a Facebook group. Just DM me. I'll shoot you the link, man. It's free to join that. It's just really just helping other people, you know, be involved in podcasting. So, man, Instagram is the spot to go to connect with me, or YouTube is Erik Allen Media. That's where I post all my shows, and all the shorts go there. So if you want to check out shows or just fun, cheesy videos, I post on there too. Those are on there too. So, man, it's such an honor, though, to be on your show, dude. Thank you, Brennan, so much, man.
100%. Hey, listen, as always, I always close out the show with this. Please do not listen to an episode like this. Please do not listen to somebody as impactful as this and then just say, yep, that sounded really good, and then don't do anything with it. You owe it to yourself and everybody around you and everybody that's watching your leadership, everybody who's going to be impacted from you becoming all that you should be. You owe it to yourself and to them to take something that you heard during this episode and take action on it, because the better you become, the better the world becomes, one person at a time, one step at a time. Erik, thank you so much. I hope you get a flood of followers from this, man, because I'm serious. You're doing yourself a disservice if you do not go follow this man, follow his work, join the Facebook group. If you're interested in podcasting, get the podcast course. He had my lead on for episode number 12. He knows what he's doing, so go check it out, erikallenmedia.com. For everybody who's watching, thank you so much for tuning in. It means the world to us. We appreciate you. We love you, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks,
Peace.
Sir.